Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachot, page 7b, top of the page with the words V'ilu Magbia Es Shulchan Lo Katani. Rav Sheshet notes the entire process of the replacement of the showbread is taught in the Mishnah, and yet the statement, a priest raises the table above the ground so that the bowls of frankincense can be properly removed from them, is not taught. One can therefore conclude from the Mishnah that just as the bowls of frankincense are removed from a vessel that is resting upon the ground, meaning the table, so too, one may remove a handful of a meal offering from a vessel that is resting upon the ground. Lav amar tasam seder avodas nakad hacha nami seder avodas nakad. The Gemara rejects this proof. Didn't you already say there, with regard to the Mishnah that discusses improper intentions expressed during the service of a meal offering, 12a, that the Tana cited only the order of sacrificial rites? Here too the Tana cited only the order of sacrificial rites. Therefore one cannot prove from here that there is no requirement to raise the table. Midami hasunonachit leminyana de kohanim machanachit leminyana de kohanim. The Gemara asks, are these Mishnayot comparable? There on 12a, the Tana did not delve into the number of priests involved in the service of a meal offering. Here, on 99b, the Tana does in fact delve into the number of priests involved in the service of the showbread. Therefore, if it is so, meaning if the table must be raised before the bowls. Moment here. Lost the place to find it. I hit the computer and it kind of moved up. There on 12a, the Tana did not delve into the number of priests involved in the service of the meal offering. Here on 99b, the Tana does in fact delve into the number of priests involved in the service of the showbread. Therefore, if it is so, meaning the table must be raised before the bowls of frankincense are removed, let the Tana teach that another priest raises the table. Rather, conclude from the Mishnah that one may remove a handful of a meal offering from the vessel that is resting upon the ground. The Gemara affirms, conclude from here that this is so. Amarav Pshitali Ko Mitzmichli Shalavi Karaka Shikematzinu Vesiluk Bazichin Mikachi Minchli Shal Gavi Karaka Shikematzinu Vesidur Bazichin. Rava said, it is obvious to me that a priest may remove a handful from a vessel that is resting upon the ground, as we find such an instance in the case of the removal of the bowls of frankincense from the table of the showbread, since the table is resting upon the ground of the sanctuary when they are removed. Similarly, one can sanctify a meal offering in a vessel that is resting upon the ground, as we find such an instance in the case of the arrangement of the bowls of frankincense upon the table of the showbread. Boy Rava Kiddush Komet Mai Bimincha Yalfina La Omidam Yalfina La Hadar Pashta Midam Yalfina La. Rava raises a dilemma with regard to the sanctification of a handful by placing it in a vessel that is resting upon the ground. What is the halacha? Do we derive this halacha from the sanctification of a meal offering, in which case one can sanctify a handful in this manner, just as he can do so with a meal offering? Or do we derive it from the collection of the blood of an offering, in which case one cannot do so, just as the blood of an offering may not be collected in a vessel that is resting upon the ground? Rather than resolve the dilemma, we derive it from the collection of the blood. Umi amar Ravahachi Yehait mar komet shechilko b'shnei kelim Rav Nachman amar Eino kadosh v'Rava amar kadosh The Gemara asks, and did Rava really say this? That the halacha with regard to the sanctification of a handful is derived from the collection of the blood? But it was stated with regard to a full measure of a handful that a priest divided and placed in 2 vessels. Rav Nachman says that it is not sanctified, and Rava says that it is sanctified. And if it is so that the halacha of the handful is derived from the collection of the blood, then let Rava derive from blood that the handful is not sanctified in this manner, just as the blood is not sanctified when divided into 2. The Gemara responds, Rava retracted that statement and ruled that a handful is not sanctified when divided and placed into 2 vessels. Okay, continuing, where were we? I'm going to go back a little bit to, did Rava really say this? I said this already, but let's go back again. The Gemara asks, and did Rava really say this? That the halacha with regard to the sanctification of a handful is derived from the collection of blood? But it was stated with regard to a full measure of a handful that a priest divided and placed in 2 vessels. Rav Nachman says that it is not sanctified, and Rava says that it is sanctified. And if it is so that the halacha of the handful is derived from the collection of blood, then let Rava derive from blood that the handful is not sanctified in this manner, just as the blood is not sanctified when divided into 2. The Gemara responds, Rava retracted that statement and ruled that a handful is not sanctified when divided and placed into 2 vessels. Titani Rav Tachlifa ben Shaul Kidesh Pachos Michdi Hazar Bechlize Pachos Michdi Hazar Bechlize Lo Kidesh. The Gemara further discusses the halacha with regard to the collection of the blood. And with regard to blood, from where do we derive that it is not sanctified in halves, meaning when collected in 2 vessels? It is derived from that which Rav Tachlifa ben Shaul teaches with regard to the water of purification. If the priest sanctified the water in 2 vessels in such a manner that he sanctified less than the amount of sprinkling in this vessel, meaning there was not enough water into which he could dip a bundle of hyssop and sprinkle the water with it, and he sanctified less than the amount of sprinkling in that vessel, then he has not sanctified the water. Even if he subsequently combines the contents of both vessels into a single vessel, the water is not sanctified. The Gemara continues, and a dilemma was raised before the sages with regard to the collection of blood of the sin offering for the purpose of sprinkling it upon the altar. What is the halacha? Is the ruling with regard to the water of purification a halacha transmitted to Moses from Sinai, in which case the halacha with regard to blood may not be derived from it, as we do not derive other cases from a halacha transmitted to Moses from Sinai. O Dilma Hasam Maitaima the Gemara explains the other side of the dilemma. Perhaps there, in the case of the water of purification, what is the reason that it is not sanctified? It is possible that the reason is that it is written in a verse that is referring to the water initially placed in the vessel and dipped in the water, Numbers 19:18. If this verse is the source of the halacha that the hyssop may be dipped in the water purification only when there was initially enough water in the vessel for sprinkling, then here too, in the case of the blood of a sin offering, isn't it written, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood, Leviticus 4:6. The Itmar Amar Rabbi Zrika Amar Rabbi Lazar Af B'dam Lo Kiddush Amar Rabbi Tanya Nami Hachi B'fnei Kohen Miniach v'tava v'lo maspeg. The Gemara continues, and it was stated with regard to this dilemma. Rabbi Elazar says, even in the case of the blood, one has not sanctified it if he collected less than full measure of blood in a single vessel. Rava said that this is also taught in a Braita with regard to the bull of the anointed priest. The verse states, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle the blood. Leviticus 4:6. From the term, and the priest shall dip, it is derived that there must be enough blood inside the vessel in which to dip his finger, and there should not be so little blood that he must resort to wiping his finger along the walls of the vessel. Adam shiur tevila mikao min adam sheba'ina. The writer continues. Additionally, from the term in the blood, it is derived that there should initially be in the vessel containing the blood a measure fit for dipping his finger. Furthermore, it is derived from the term of the blood that he must sprinkle from the blood of the matter, as will be explained. Tvilos hainu haza sheva pa'amim migaro kasav rachmana v'dam. And it was necessary for the merciful one to write, and the priest shall dip, and it was necessary for the merciful one to write in the blood. Despite the fact that both terms are referring to the amount of blood that must be in the vessel. Because if the merciful one had written only, and the priest shall dip, I would say that it is enough if the vessel contains enough blood for even one sprinkling, even though the priest did not initially collect a measure fit for all the sprinklings. It is enough with which to sprinkle 7 times. Therefore, the merciful one writes in the blood, and if the merciful one had written only in the blood, I would say that if there was initially a full measure collected in the vessel, then the sprinkling is valid, even if now the priest must resort to wiping his finger. Therefore, the merciful one writes, and the priest shall dip, indicating that the priest must be able to dip his finger into the blood and not have to wipe it on the walls of the vessel. The word returns to the last statement of the Braita that the priest must sprinkle from the blood of the matter. This statement serves to exclude what? Rava said it serves to exclude the remainder of blood on his finger from the previous sprinkling, meaning the priest must dip his finger into the blood. Therefore, before each sprinkling, he may not sprinkle with the blood that remains on his finger from the previous sprinkling. The Gemara notes this supports the opinion from Elazar, who says the remainder of the blood that remained on the priest's finger is unfit for sprinkling. Amrle Ravin. Rav Amri Talmidach Amr Rav Amram Tanya Haya Maze Benitiza Haza'am Yando Ve'im Ad Shelo Hiza Ta'un Kibus Mishihiza Ein Ta'un Kibus. Rava Bar Ada said to Rava, your students say that Rav Amram says that it is taught in a Braita in the case where a priest was sprinkling from the blood of a sin offering, and the blood of the sin offering sprayed from his hand onto the garment. And the halacha is as follows: if the blood sprayed onto the garment before he sprinkled, the garment requires laundering, as is the halacha when the blood of a sin offering that is fit for sprinkling fell on a garment. But if the blood sprayed onto the garment after he had already sprinkled, it does not require laundering. My love. My lab ad shelo gamar hazah. So, gamar hazah so shemomina the shiraim shebesva kshirim. Ravin Bar Ravada asked, "What is it not correct to say that this means if the blood sprayed onto the garment before he completed all of his sprinkling, then the garment requires laundering? And if the blood sprayed onto the garment after he completed his sprinkling, then the garment does not require laundering? If so, one can conclude from the Braita that the remainder of the blood that remained on his finger between each sprinkling is fit for sprinkling, or as otherwise, it would not result in the requirement to launder a garment upon which it sprayed. Lo, עד שלא יצא מידו הזר טעון קיבוץ משיצא הזר מידו ונתזה ממה שנשאר אין טעון קיבוץ. The Gemara rejects the suggestion. No, the Braita is saying that if the blood sprayed from his hand onto the garment before any particular sprinkling left his hand, the garment requires laundering. But if the blood was sprayed after a sprinkling left his hand, in which case the blood sprayed from that which remained on his finger following the sprinkling, then the garment does not require laundering, as the blood left on his finger was already rendered unfit for sprinkling. Eisve Abaye, Gomar Mihalazois, Mikaneach Yadot, Bigufa Shel Para, Gamar In, Logomar Lo. Abaye raised an objection to Rava from the Mishnah discussing the red heifer, Para 3:9. When the priest has completed sprinkling the blood of the red heifer toward the entrance of the sanctuary, he wipes his hand from the blood on the body of the heifer. Abaye explains his objection. The Mishnah states that when the priest completed all the sprinklings, and yes, he wipes his hand, it may be inferred that if he did not complete the sprinklings, he does not wipe his hand, even though blood remains on his finger from each preceded sprinkling. This proves that the blood that remains on his finger is fit for sprinkling. Amar le Gamar Mikaneach Yado, Lo Gamar Mikaneach Etzba'o. Rava said to Abaye, the Mishnah means when the priest completed all of the sprinklings, he wipes his hand. If he has not yet completed all of them, then he does not wipe his hand, but he must wipe his finger to remove the blood after each sprinkling, as that blood is no longer fit for subsequent sprinklings. The Gemara raises difficulty. Granted, after he completes the sprinklings, he wipes his hand on the body of the heifer, as it is written, and the heifer shall be burned in his sight, her skin and her flesh and her blood, Numbers 19 verse 5, which indicates that the blood of the heifer must be burned together with his flesh. But if, when the priest had not yet completed the sprinklings, he wipes his finger, then with what does he wipe? What does he wipe? Because if you say that he wipes his finger on the body of the heifer, the Mishnah should have taught he wipes his hand and his finger on the body of the heifer, rather from the fact that the Mishnah does not teach this, that he wipes his finger on the body of the heifer. One can conclude from this Mishnah that his finger does not require wiping between sprinklings. Abaye said he wipes his finger on the edge of the bowl containing the blood, as is written, atoning bowls of gold. Ezra 1:10, which is referring to the bowls containing the blood. The root kafar can also mean to wipe. Umi amar Rabbi Elazar hachi v'ayidmar chaviti kohen gadol Yochanan amar eino kadosh lechasayin Rabbi Elazar amar mitov sheklei lechasayin kadosh lechasayin. The Gemara returns the issue of the sanctification of blood collected in two vessels. Rabbi Elazar, and did Rabbi Elazar really say this, that the blood is sanctified only when a full measure is initially collected in a single vessel? That it was stated with regard to the high priest's griddle cake offering. Rabbi Yochanan says that it is not sanctified in halves, meaning if half of a tenth of an ephah was placed in one vessel and the second half in another vessel, neither is sanctified. Rabbi Elazar says, since it is sacrificed in half, as half of the meal offering is sacrificed in the morning, half in the afternoon, it may be sanctified in halves.